Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land.
Please welcome our Mistress of Ceremonies, a voice of joy, purpose, and community, Dr. Christopher Love.
Good afternoon to this beloved community. Good afternoon, Lexington. What a powerful way to begin. Grounded in spirit, rooted in history, and lifted by purpose. Before we go any further, it's important that we pause to acknowledge those who helped make this moment possible. This gathering does not happen without our community support. At this time, we ask that you turn your attention to the screens to acknowledge our community partners. We would also like to thank our partners, Alexis of Lexington and the Milroy. Without their partnership, we would not be able to make this event happen. And today, we want to thank the donors, sponsors, and partners who believed in the mission, believed in the message, and invested in the work. Your commitment reminds us that progress is not carried by one voice, but sustained by many hands. For more than 50 years, this community has gathered through struggle and triumph, through marches and movements, to honor the life, the vision, and the unfinished work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Before the speeches, before the celebrations, before the future we're building together, this community marched. And that matters, because Dr. King taught us that progress does not happen by accident. That's right. But it does happen when people show up, stand together, and choose courage over comfort. He reminded us that real leadership requires courage, not compliance. The courage to speak when silence is easier, the courage to act when compliance feels safer, and the courage to stand firm when our values are tested. Today is not only a remembrance, it is a celebration of his life's work and a commitment to the work ahead. Our theme reminds us of that calling. Live, choose, belong. The right to live with dignity. The right to choose our futures. And the responsibility to build a community where everyone belongs. This afternoon, you'll hear voices of leadership, vision, and hope from all across our city, our Commonwealth, and our institutions, all united by one belief. Justice, democracy, and beloved community are worth protecting. So I invite you to take a breath, open your hearts, and stay present, because this work continues and we are the ones called to carry it forward. While this event will be nothing without you all, we know that this type of event does not just happen. There are hands and hearts that put in an immense amount of effort to make this annual celebration happen. At this time, I ask that all members of the MLK Holiday Committee stand and be recognized as I call your name. Councilmember James Brown, Chester Grundy, Tiffany Maskin, Sharon Murphy, Kendriana Price, Sierra Coleman, Jay Alexander, Dale Morgan, Ryan Gers, Stacey Webster-Lynn, Michael Adams, Jonathan Roman, and Devon Daniel. Please put up the room. We would also like to pause at this time and acknowledge any elected officials. Would you please stand at this time? Thank you so much for being here. It is now my honor to welcome messages from leaders who understand the power of service, community, and collective responsibility. Please welcome Linda Gordon, Mayor of Lexington, followed by messages from the University of Kentucky, President Eli Caputo, and our Governor, Amy Beshear. Immediately following these messages, we will welcome JR with a spoken word.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Kristen, for that introduction. And yes, we did walk, didn't we? A bit brisk, but wonderful. The sun is out. It was a good walk. I am so happy to be joining you for the 2026 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. celebration. It's the 53rd year of this wonderful event. Thank you. I want to especially congratulate Chester Grundy and members of his team whom you just heard. They continue to put on a wonderful, meaningful celebration of Dr. King's life and legacy. I want to recognize, I know we have some council members who marched and some who are here with us. I believe right now we have, well, of course, Councilmember James Brown, Councilmember Tyler Morton, Councilmember Shayla Lynch, Councilmember Emma Curtis, Councilmember Liz Sheehan, Councilmember Joseph Hale, and Councilmember Jennifer Reynolds. Let's thank them. I would like to give a very warm Kentucky welcome to today's keynote speaker, Reverend Devon Crawford, to Lexington. We regret that it's a little colder than San Francisco here, I think. But nevertheless, we are so happy that you are joining us today. And we're also happy to welcome Rocky Atkins from the governor's office. This afternoon, we will experience incredible performances and hear powerful words that bring Dr. King's legacy to life. Ultimately, in our community, it is all of us who keep that legacy alive. All of you, through your service, through your willingness to stand up for what is right. Dr. King was a man of compassion and courage who believed in the power of ordinary people to have an extraordinary impact. Every day, we each have a responsibility to carry on the work that Dr. King began. We've made great progress together, but the work is never finished. We must continue to ensure that Lexington, Kentucky remains a beacon of hope and progress for everyone. The best way to honor Dr. King's legacy is through action. We all know that. As he reminded us, the time is always right to do what is right. My thanks to all of you as we move our city forward together every single day. Thank you so much.
On behalf of the University of Kentucky, thank you for being part of this event and this day. Here in the heart of our community, you are carrying Dr. King's legacy forward in a very real, visible way. This event is more than a marked route through our streets. It is a reminder that the future is not automatic. It is made step by step by people and communities who believe in a tomorrow that is healthier, wealthier, and wiser. It is also a reminder of who we want to be for one another in Lexington and across Kentucky. Neighbors who show up, who listen, and who believe that every person deserves respect and safety, a fair chance to build a good life. Dr. King spoke to the conscience of a nation but he also spoke to cities and campuses like ours. For our university, that calling is practical. It means being a good neighbor to this community, opening our doors wide to students from many backgrounds, creating classrooms, clinics, and workplaces where people are treated with care and where they can do their very best. It also means listening to those who have not always been seen or heard, to the hopes and worries of young people who are inheriting this moment and will lead us forward, to partners across our city and our Commonwealth who are working every day to make life better for their families and communities. Simply put, days like today remind us that progress is rarely one big moment. It's a series of steady steps taken together on our streets, in our schools, in our homes, and on our campus. When we walk side by side, we send a simple but powerful message. Every person here matters, and every person should have the chance to learn and work, to be healthy and prosper. As your land-grant university, that is the standard we want to hold ourselves to. Advancing our mission of education, research, service, and care to lift people up and widen the circle of opportunity across Kentucky. Thank you for the example you set by being here. I look forward to the future. We will keep advancing together.
Hey everyone, it's Andy. Welcome to the Lexington Martin Luther King Jr. Commemorative Program. After a year of division and unimaginable challenges, it's so important that we remember the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and that we reflect on his impact. I believe it's our job to never stop standing up for what's right, especially when others are intent on spreading hate. We can't beat hate with more hate, and we can't beat cruelty with anything other than humanity. We win by lifting each other up and by showing love and acceptance every day. To do that, we must end the racial injustice that continues to hurt our people and that holds our society back from reaching its full potential. Dr. King said that when one commits themselves to the noble struggle for equal rights, they make themselves a better person, and they make a greater nation of their country and a finer world to live in. And there's no more important mission than that. I know that I'll never be able to feel the ever-present weight of racism, inequality, and injustice, but I'm committed to listening, hearing, and learning, and then taking action. I've been proud to work with folks from across Kentucky to move our Commonwealth forward. It's why I work to restore voting rights for what is now nearly 200,000 Kentuckians, those who'd had their voices silenced but are now able to be heard again because there is power in second chances. At the state level, I made Juneteenth an executive branch holiday because every Kentuckian should know their state government recognizes this important day in our history. It's why I signed another order based on the Crown Act, which prohibits discrimination against state workers because of hairstyles historically associated with race. We removed the statue of Jefferson Davis from our state capitol because a glaring symbol of bigotry and division does not belong in any rotunda anywhere in the country. It's why I vetoed anti-DEI legislation and why we've worked to support our great HBCUs. In 2021, I signed legislation to support those HBCUs. This helps students attending Simmons or KSU receive tuition grants and encourage collaboration between the two schools to help more students attend. Those schools don't just serve the students enrolled, they also help lift up our fellow Kentuckians and communities. Like my kids, I'm proud to say that when Will and Lila graduate high school, they'll have an associate degree from KSU. Through our efforts, Team Kentucky has partnered with both Simmons and KSU to create opportunities and programs to support health, teacher preparation, second chances, and more. I'm grateful for both of these schools and the positive impact they're making in Kentucky and beyond. And through the implementation of new signs and historic markers to celebrate our HBCUs, we're sharing that pride with everyone. We're also demanding pre-K for all for every 4-year-old in Kentucky. because every child deserves a strong start. And I'm proud to say we've received bipartisan support of this initiative. We built new hospitals across the Commonwealth and expanded health care. And as you heard in my State of the Commonwealth, we're going to restore the American dream of owning a home right here in Kentucky by making big, bold investments now. So far, I've proposed a game-changing $150 million investment in our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, combined with private dollars that'll create $1 billion of new housing. We've secured more than 68,000 new good jobs for Kentuckians. We're making meaningful investments and addressing the needs of communities that have been forgotten far too long. We're bringing jobs to Kentuckians versus our people having to go to those jobs. And now, families are seeing more good-paying opportunities than ever before. When we work together and when we're intentional, we can make a difference. We cannot stop and we will not stop. Because as Dr. King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Folks, we have a president who denies that racism even exists. A president who removed MLK Day and Juneteenth from next year's free admission days to our national parks and instead included his own birthday. Here's where I stand. I believe that diversity is a strength and never a weakness. That the story of Martin Luther King Jr. and our country's long march for justice and freedom is bigger than any one president. And this march is going to outlast any single administration. I believe our diversity of backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives open new doors to new ideas and a brighter future for Kentucky and the United States of America. And I believe that at this time in our country, it's our job to speak up. In the words of Dr. King, let us not lose faith in man and certainly not in God. We must believe that a prejudiced mind can be changed and that man, by the grace of God, can be lifted from the valley of hate to the high mountain of love. It's your voice. It's everyone's voice. Those voices reaching into the darkness, creating the light, changing the minds, and reminding us that we have come so far. Thank you all for gathering to celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Together, you're making a difference. And I'm proud to say that this governor will stand up with you, walk beside you, and do the work needed to move forward together. Let's keep working together and celebrating those like Martin Luther King Jr. who've shown us the way. Remember, life's short, so keep doing good things and be kind to each other. Thanks, y'all.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I know it's a little cold outside, I'm gonna try it again. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be in a room filled with people who lead, build, and influence in so many ways. I want to thank you all for sharing your time, your attention, and this intentional space with me. Today, I intend on offering a moment of reflection, shaped in rhythm and words. This, ladies and gentlemen, is my spoken piece titled, Our Miseducation on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You know, we were taught to look up at Dr. King instead of marching right beside him. We were taught a voice echoing from history, but not his footsteps pacing the living room floor. They gave us a speech, but not the silence that came after. They gave us a dream, but not the daily commitment that his dream required. Because Dr. King was not an idea. He was a man. He was a man who woke up early, buttoned up his shirt with intentionality, and stepped into a world that demanded something from him every single day. He was a husband who knew the weight of partnership. He was a father who understood that legacy was not just what he preached to a nation, but what he molded at the dinner table. He knew that justice had to make sense to a child's ears. That love had to be practiced at home before it could be preached to the rest of the world. See, they miseducated us. They miseducated us by making him distant, untouchable, as if greatness means separation. But Dr. King believed in the right to live, not as a theory, but as a promise. The right to wake up whole, the right to access care, the right to exist without apology in your own body, in your own neighborhood, and in your own skin color. He believed in the right to choose because choice is the engine of dignity. Choice to vote, the choice to protect your health, the choice to participate in shaping your future rather than being the helpless victim of another one's decisions. This, ladies and gentlemen, is why balance matters. This is why health matters. This is why community matters. Because Dr. King understood that democracy is not loud, it's lit. That justice doesn't come accidentally, that it is born of our disaffection for injustice. He spoke of the beloved community, but not as a distant horizon, but as a sacred responsibility, a place where no one is disposable, where leadership looks like service, where progress is measured by who is protected, not by who's advantaged. So today, to the very leaders in this room, to the decision makers, to the builders, the teachers, the guardians of policy and possibility, this is your charge. Keep moving forward. Keep choosing courage over compliance. Keep standing tall when it's easier to sit. Keep speaking when silence feels safer, because Dr. King did not give us permission to admire his work, no. He gave us a mandate to act. Stand for health, stand for access, stand for the sacred right of every person to have a voice that counts and a life that is valued. Stand for something, or history will remind us what happens when we don't. Remember Dr. King, not as a monument, no, but as a man who showed us that love, when organized, can become justice. And that work, ladies and gentlemen, well, that work is ours to carry. Thank you.
One more round of applause for JR. In college, I was once assigned a research project where we were asked to interview the elders of our family. The assignment was designed for us to look at previous generations and draw comparisons and contrasts to how we walked into adulthood. All my life, my grandmother played such a large role, and I could not wait to hear about her perceptions of life, especially since she was alive during the Civil Rights era. I remember I asked her questions like, did you march? What did you think of the leaders of that time? Did you ever fear going to jail because of your beliefs? And while I don't remember explicitly what she stated, I remember reflecting immediately after, thinking to myself, what would I have done? Would I have been vocal during that time? Would I be willing to lay my life down for the belief that everyone deserved the same rights? If I'm honest, though that event happened nearly 20 years ago, those questions still plague me today. I often listen to people who say they would have never tolerated slavery, white terrorism, or Jim Crow's segregation. They sometimes go so far to criticize the elders of being too complacent, too accommodating to the dark forces of racism, oppression, and injustice. They smugly state to each other that I would have never put up with that. But as we stand here today, where healthcare, voting rights, educational equity, the truth of our history, housing, workers' rights, livable wages, the right to live in peace and free of state violence, and our basic civil rights are all under attack, I find myself asking again, what am I doing? And my hope is that you are doing the same. 20 and 30 years from now, when our children and our grandchildren are reaping either the harvest or the harm of this generation, what will they say? When they ask you, what did you do during that time? What will you say? Today is not only a day of reflection of the teachings of the great life of Dr. Martin Luther King, but it is also a call to action for each of us to put our hands, our hearts, and our minds together to find a way to keep moving forward.
We will now have a special scholarship presentation from Bluegrass Community and Technical College.
Good afternoon. Greetings from Bluegrass Community and Technical College. I'd like to start by thanking Professor Stacy Webster, as well as Reverend Evans, our Associate Dean of Financial Aid. Stacy served on the committee, as you heard her name called earlier, but also has led the efforts in identifying today's outstanding student. So we're so grateful to both of them. If you did not have the chance to attend the breakfast this morning, I strongly encourage you to attend it in the future. Every year that I've gone, it just seems to get better and better. And this year was a little extra special, and I don't know if it's because the last year has been a little challenging or if it was everything combined. But one of the speakers this morning, Sharon Price, was talking about education. And she said, the fight for education is the fight for the soul of this nation. The fight for education is the fight for the soul of this nation. We strongly believe this at BCTC, and that is the core reason why we are an open access institution. All are welcome, and we work to meet at the heart of our mission is one student at a time. And that reinforces that we focus on each and every individual, what they bring to the table, and how we can help them reach their dreams and be successful. Education remains one of the most powerful tools for advancing Dr. King's vision of justice, leadership, and community impact. As an open access institution, BCTC ensures access for all. The MLK Scholarship represents BCTC's commitment to investing in outstanding students who lead through service, character, and academic excellence. The momentum at BCTC is stronger than ever. For the first time in our college's history, we found out in December that we are ranked in the top 20% of community colleges nationally with 10,000 students or more. We've had a record enrollment last year of over 18,000 students. And this year in the fall, we were up by 5.9%. And so far in the spring, we were up by 12.2%. All this reinforces BCTC's identity as an institution rooted in innovation and transformation, focused on student access and success, workforce readiness, and community impact. So, it's with great pleasure that we demonstrate that publicly when we announce the 2026-27, I've been talking a lot today, the 2026-27 BCTC MLK Scholarship recipient as Miss Aaliyah Duncan. I'm going to break on you for a minute. She is a senior at Lafayette High School with a 4.0 GPA. She has a strong record of civic engagement and volunteerism. She's involved in her church's canned food and supply giveaway. She's active in promoting literacy and confidence building at Keynote Elementary. And she is active as a volunteer at the Lexington's Children's Theater. She plans to major in mechanical engineering, so please join me in congratulating her. I will end by saying this. BCTC will continue to support Dr. King's legacy by empowering students to change their lives and their communities.
Let me first express my regrets that Miss Ann Grundy, as most people know, is not in the house today. And this is the first program she misses in 53 years. Okay. So keep her close. but know that you will hear from her in this program. All right. This 2026 MLK holiday program happens at a time when we find ourselves engaged in an intense struggle around the question of who will control the telling of the history of Black people in this country. As we gather today, there is a powerful concerted effort from the highest levels of our government to eliminate the teaching of the authentic history of Black people from schools, libraries, museums, archives, cultural centers, universities, and other institutions of learning. This repressive effort to revise, erase, and distort the true story of the Black experience has never escaped the critical lens of the Black photographer. It is through that lens that light has been cast on this history, exposing both the joys and the triumphs of Black life, as well as the horrors of injustice. Through the lens of the Black photographers, Black life is revealed in all of its complexity, showing us that Black people have always been here and will always be here. Living, loving, struggling, overcoming. It is important to note that the man we honor today was part of a remarkably rich legacy of Kentucky Black photographers, some of whom have received national recognition for their outstanding work. It is a legacy that includes names such as Crawford McCann, who profoundly changed the story of the civil rights movement in this city. His powerful photos from the 1960s reveal the untold story of courageous grassroots activism by Lexingtonians that had never been recognized or reported by the local media. It should be remembered that Calvin was also a Pulitzer Prize nominee. But we also need to shout out the names of Marvin and Marvin Smith, twin brothers from Lexington, who for 30 years documented the rich, vibrant culture of Harlem, New York. Then there's Chester Higgins Jr. Born in Lexington, he became a longtime photojournalist for the New York Times, and he published more than a dozen books, very popular books, on African descended people throughout the Black diaspora. Some folks may recognize this next brother, another homeboy, Shahid Chikwindu, known as Shiloh Baptist Church's Clay Fishbag, who just recently retired from the Washington Post as a senior photojournalist. He was honored by the Obama White House as Photojournalist of the Year in 2008, and I'm very proud to say that he's my student. Okay. And finally, our own beloved Patrick Mitchell, who for many years produced beautiful images of Black life in Lexington. A man of many, many talents. Patrick was my go-to photographer for this program for a long, long time. And he left us way, way too soon. Like the historian, the poet, the writer, the musician, the Black photographer has played a critical role as truth teller, as revealer, as witness. Monetta Sleet was such a witness. And what's more important, He was our witness to history. Monita Sleep Jr. was the first African-American photographer to win a Pulitzer Prize in photojournalism. He was a native of Owensboro, Kentucky, and a 1947 graduate of Kentucky State College, now Kentucky State University. He earned his place as a history maker through his 41-year career with Johnson Publications, where he was a senior photographer for both Ebony and Jet magazines. It was through his employment with Johnson Publications that Monita Sleep Jr. would come to be on the front lines of the civil rights movement, where he would document such historic moments as the 1963 March on Washington, Freedom Summit in 1964, the March from Selma to Montgomery, the funeral of Malcolm X in 1965, Dr. King's Nobel Prize ceremony in 1964, and much, much more. In the best tradition of Black photography, Monita Sleep Jr. was more than just an observer and recorder of the civil rights movement. He once said that this about himself, and I quote, "During the civil rights movement, I was a participant, just like everybody else. I just happened to be there with a camera. And I felt and firmly believed that my mission was to photograph and show the side of the movement that was the right side." As a result of his regular presence and unique contribution to the movement, Monita Sleep Jr. and Dr. King grew to greatly admire and respect each other. And that relationship gave Sleep special access to the King family, allowing him to share many of the King family's personal moments. It was this special relationship that ultimately resulted in him becoming Dr. King's personal photographer. He recorded and documented not just Dr. King as a warrior prophet that we know him to be, but he recorded and documented him as a full human being, a husband, a father, as someone accessible and available to everyday people. In short, someone just like us. In your program today, there's an insert. Would you pull it out? I want to make sure you do this. On one side, you'll find the iconic photo of Coretta Scott King at the funeral of her husband, Martin Luther King Jr. This is the photo that won Monita Sleep Jr. the Pulitzer Prize in 1969. But it is also a photo that almost did not happen. Now, if you'll bear with me just a few more minutes, I want to share with you a short video that will give you the backstory to this incredible photo. In it, you will see Monita Sleep Jr. talk about himself and how he got the assignment to cover Dr. King's funeral. You'll also hear from one of the Johnson Publications colleagues, MLK, talking about how the photo almost didn't happen were it not for the intervention of Coretta Scott King herself. And you will also hear from retired federal judge Gregory Seeds, Monita Sleep Jr.'s son, talking about his father's special qualities, his empathy, his sensitivity, his calm professionalism that were the key assets in him capturing this historic photo.
Of course, in '68, Dr. King was assassinated. I received a call from home that this had happened. I had heard it on the radio. and to rush down to Atlanta and proceed to cover. It was pretty much that loose because everybody was in a state of panic after what had happened. So I rendezvoused with Lerone Bennett, who is now our executive editor in Atlanta, and we proceeded to try to cover. If you can imagine, there's a state of panic there. SCLC was just totally upset. And when I say that's the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, of course, the body of which Dr. King headed. And we were just trying to make some sense out of the whole thing and how to go about covering it. The world press descended on Atlanta. Everybody wanted to get into the church to photograph the funeral services.
At Dr. King's funeral, I guess they had a pool of photographers covering the funeral, and Sleet couldn't get in. This is Sleet, Dr. King's photographer. Word got to his Coretta King that Sleet was being denied entrance, and she sent word out that if Sleet not only in, but have the vantage point, then no photographers would be allowed in. And from that assignment came the Pulitzer.
Dad was a pretty calm dude. I mean, he didn't get super excited. I think it was part of the discipline of being sometimes in these emotional situations and wanting to do his job. An example of that, inner calm, professionalism he developed over time as a photojournalist is, for me, best captured in the Pulitzer Prize photograph.
The photograph is not so much of Mrs. King as you might think, but of her daughter Bernice. Because Bernice was fidgeting on her mother's lap, looking at her, just kind of, I guess, looking for explanations about what this was all about. And I was a father and could empathize with what was going on. And just began to shoot picture after picture. She looked at her mother and took the sequence of shots. The arrangement was that with AP that all the photographs would be given to them. They would send them out on the wire for the daily press all over the world. This was done, and they selected what went out on the wire. Some of my pictures, and this one included, went out. And as a result, was later submitted to the Pulitzer Committee and won the prize.
So lastly, I want to just take a moment to recognize a few people in our audience who support this specific would happen. This exhibit would not be here today. And I want to first recognize Emmy Woolsey and her family all the way from Owensboro, who, please stand, please stand. Please stand. Thank you, sir. Next, this exhibit is co-sponsored by Alpha Beta Lambda, chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Will the brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha please stand, all of you. This program is an Alpha trifecta. We had the speakers are Alpha, Dr. King's are Alpha, and we have the Sleets are Alpha. Alpha's fingerprints all over. I'm an Alpha, right? I wasn't gonna brag about that. And we're also absolutely honored to have members of Monita Sleet Jr.'s family in the audience. Would you please stand? Thank you. One last person, I want to just raise the name of Bob Morris, who is the retired editor of the Inquirer Messenger newspaper in Owensboro. My first contact with Lady down the rabbit hole, which I got in touch with him. So, Bob, just know we're thinking about you. I want to ask all of you, please, when you meet the holiday, spend some time with this exhibit, particularly if you bring children. You want to do a photo. You gotta be your own witness of history, right? So spend some time. This is just one day. We hoped that it would be after that didn't work out. So this is it. take advantage of this moment and, raise up, elevate the name of Monita St. Jr. Truth teller, historian, history maker, witness to history. Thank you very much.
You're broken down and tired of living life on a merry-go-round, and you can't find the fire within you, but we gon' walk it out. Mountains, we're gonna walk it out. Mountains, and I rise like the day. I rise on and pray. I rise up, and now to 1,000 times again. I rise up, high like a wave. I rise up, despite of the ache. I rise up, and now to 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you. Silence isn't quiet, and it feels like it's getting hard to breathe. And I know you feel like dying, but I promise you will bring the world to its feet. Mountains, bring it to its feet. Mountains, I'll rise like the day. I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for well, that we have each other. Oh, we will rise, we will rise, we will rise. Oh, we will rise. I'll rise up. I like a wave, I rise up in spite of the ache. I rise 1,000 times again. And I rise up, high like a wave. I rise up in spite of the ache. I rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you. Alright, let's go get it moving just a little bit. Hey y'all, I'm Jocelyn. How y'all doing today? Glad to be out here to celebrate Dr. King with you all. I'm from right here in Lexington, Kentucky, and this is my band. It's my percussion. We're gonna do a tune for you. Y'all can clap if you want to. You can move if you want to. You can get up and jig if you want to. Whatever you feel like. The world keeps on changing. The world keeps on changing. The world keeps on changing. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There are all kinds of changes. It's enough to really blow your mind. You and me, we keep on loving and loving. We'll get through these changing times. Things are good, things are bad, boy, it's crazy. I'm telling you what I know. To survive, you've got to know the signs. You and me, we keep on pushing. We gotta keep on pushing, yeah. We'll get through these changing times. We'll get through these changing times. We'll get through these changing times.
God, Allah, Dios, Inyame, Yahweh. Whatever it is you call your supreme being, has smiled on our speaker today. He is the son of Deborah and Jerome, the brother of Danielle, the uncle of Desolil. He is a graduate of Morehouse College, that historic black school in Atlanta designed with just black men in mind, that gave us Julian Bond, Maynard Jackson, Howard Thurman, Luke and Gerald Beard, Raphael Warnock, countless others, including the man whose life we celebrate today. While at Morehouse, our speaker was campus minister at the International Martin Luther King Jr. Chapel, and he was national director of the Multi-Faith Initiative to End Mass Incarceration, which was based at the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church. He earned his master's from the University of Chicago School of Divinity, and he is currently pursuing a PhD in theology from Boston University. His work centers on racial equity, voting rights, reparations, and public safety reform, and it bridges the worlds of theology, public policy, grassroots organizing, and civil disobedience. He is currently the senior pastor of historic 3rd Street Baptist Church in San Francisco, which is a global village committed to transforming the world through radical love, prophetic witness, and the beloved community. Our speaker says he's a proud son of Birmingham. Birmingham? That Birmingham? That Birmingham where Eugene Bull Connor and his attack dogs reigned supreme? That Birmingham where no matter the brilliance of black teachers who spent their summers earning masters and PhDs, but were never good enough and never paid the same salaries of white teachers who barely had BAs. That Birmingham that made sport of bumming the homes and churches of black people. My daddy's church, 16th Street Baptist. September 15th, 1963, Addie, Carol, Cynthia, Denise, Virgil, and Johnny. But there's another Birmingham that both our speaker and I know so well. There's that Birmingham that spoon-fed him old sayings and proverbs that continue to sustain and nourish him. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches. Son, lift as you climb. What goes round comes round. And that time-honored one that still gets our attention and calls us to order. You got a good head on your shoulders, and one day you're gonna make us proud. That Birmingham, located in a state that so desperately wanted to lift the veil of slavery, that it built more historic black colleges than any other state, and it organized the very first Rosenwald schools to educate black children. That Birmingham that attracted the brightest and best of those formerly enslaved, who dared to move to a place that called itself the Magic City, and then dared to create their own black magic by developing neighborhoods, schools, music studios, shops, stores, banks, churches, medical, legal, and architectural facilities. That Birmingham that pulled out all of the stops, wrapped its arms around us, and found ways for us to nourish our Black humanity. That Birmingham that gave us ancestors who are now legends. Arthur Shores, Carrie Tuggle, Fess Watley, Gregory Durr White, John and Dorothy Porter, Mabel Barker Murphy, John Goodgame, Luke and Annie Beard, Fred Shuttlesworth, Pauline Bray Fletcher, Arthur Harold Parker, William Henry, Arthur and Minnie Gaston, Robert and Mildred Johnson, Jessica Divers Hayden, Wallace Rayfield, Edna Gardner, Emery Jackson, who are all smiling on him today. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, please help me bring to the podium a scholar, an activist, a pastor, a brother, a proud son of Birmingham, Reverend Devon Jerome Crawford. Reverend Devon Jerome Crawford.
Good afternoon, Lexington. Thank you a great deal, Sister Ann Grundy. Can we give God praise for her? That was a tremendous introduction. My eyes started to sweat a little bit. My Lord. Allow me to express my genuine appreciation to the MLK Holiday Committee here in Lexington for the honor of being invited to join you for this sacred gathering. For your care, your coordination, the way that you've committed yourselves to this sacred gathering that we hold every year. God bless you. To Mayor Gorton, thank you for your leadership. President Capilouto, Governor Bashir, thank God for your leadership. To the co-chairs of this MLK Holiday Committee, Dr. Price, thank God for your leadership. I want to give a special shout out to the co-chair, Councilman James Brown. As we're walking from the hotel to this venue, it's no secret that he's a local celebrity in the community. We could barely go 2 or 3 steps without someone pulling Brother Brown over and saying, hey, Brother Brown, good to see you. It's so great to be in good company. This brother literally has been making sure that I've been taken care of since I've landed in Lexington, picking me up from the airport at 12 midnight. Making sure I had something to eat before I went to sleep and when I woke up this morning. So I thank God for his generosity. And that speaks volumes of the spirit of your community. I thank God for you. To all the wonderful people whose hands are behind the scenes that we don't usually call their names. The custodians of this space, those who make sure that and audio-visual needs are taken care of. Ushering and the masters, thank God for all of you. I want to pause and honor our dear brother, Chester Grundy. Can we thank God for him and his leadership? That's all right. That's all right. We give honor where honor is due. His giving and his leadership has shaped this convening for over 5 decades. To pioneer a space like this and to sustain it is no small thing. It's an act of faith. It's an act of discipline, a labor of love. So we thank God for your stewardship. And lastly, I want to thank each of you who gathered this afternoon, many of you who braved the cold this morning and marched in honor and in memory of Dr. Martin Luther King. You are the people who refuse to let his legacy die. So I'm grateful that we've all gathered here to participate in the ongoing work in the movement for social justice and human rights. We're not just here to look back, but we are here to look inward and to listen for what Dr. King's witness is still asking of us in this moment. And before we begin our formal remarks, I want to just also thank God for Sister Jocelyn and sweet compression. You bless my spirit today. God bless you. If y'all ever want to come over to San Francisco, just give me a holler. You got a place at Third Baptist to hang out with us anytime. Amen. Now that he is safely dead, let us praise him. Build monuments to his glory. Sing hosannas to his name. Dead men make such convenient heroes. They cannot rise to challenge the images we would fashion from their lives. And besides, it is easier to build monuments than to make a better world. Friends, this is no ordinary day. We gather at no ordinary time in history. This is a day set aside to remember the life and the witness of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Across this nation, just like here in Lexington, communities are gathered to honor his name and to reflect on his legacy, to invoke his words. Every year, I don't know about you, but I've noticed that there's a similar pattern that happens on this day in particular. We see politicians who step up to microphones and invoke Dr. King's name. We see civic leaders who pull out familiar quotes, carefully selected, safely sanded down, accessible quotes, politically correct quotes. We hear the sound bites lifted out of context and offered back to us without the same moral weight that originally gave them power. For one weekend out of the year, everybody seems to love Dr. King. But I want to suggest, friends, that there is a danger in this kind of sentimentality. The danger is a kind of remembrance that soothes our consciousness without disturbing our commitments or our convictions. Because by Tuesday morning, much of what Dr. King stood for is still once again placed on trial. By Tuesday morning, voting rights are on trial. Voting rights are restricted rather than protected. By Tuesday morning, poverty is criminalized once again instead of being addressed. Criminal justice transformation is delayed or denied in the name of law and order. By Tuesday morning, I want to suggest the urgency of climate catastrophe is delayed and denied and deferred in our immigrant families. Our immigrant kindred continue to live under fear and surveillance and uncertainty. These same leaders who quote Dr. King on Monday will often oppose the moral vision he had for the world by Tuesday morning. And that is why our remembrance is a sacred act. Remembrance is important for us because you must realize there's a difference between honoring Dr. King and hallowing out his memory, between quoting his words and abandoning his work, between celebrating a birthday and resisting the burden he carried. Family, the stakes are too high to simply rehearse a legacy we find inspiring once a year. Stakes are too high. We are here to wrestle with the witness of one who still makes demands on us from the world. We have come to embrace the prophetic commitment to dream in a world that often feels like a nightmare. Dr. King does not belong to a political party. He does not belong to one moment in history. He does not belong to a ceremonial moment in January. He does not exist to make us feel better about ourselves. We cannot freeze him in stone on the national monument, but he stands in our history. And he stands in our conscience as a moral disruption. And if we're to be honest with ourselves, that disruption makes many of us feel uncomfortable. Many of us try to resist that kind of disruption, that because to remember him truthfully means we cannot reduce him to a symbol without substance. We cannot love the idea of Dr. King while rejecting the justice that he insisted upon. So let us be very clear as we begin today that we are not here to remember a mascot. We're not here to simply rehearse slogans. We're not just here to remember safely edited versions of history. But we have gathered to remember a prophet. One who I would argue is America's greatest prophet. And if we're going to remember Dr. King truthfully, then we must remember that before he ever became an icon, he was a man of faith. This brother was a pastor of the Lord's church, a preacher shaped by the black church, sustained by its prayers, and driven by an encounter with the living God. Because you don't face dogs and fire hoses simply because you mastered Nietzsche or Paul Tillich. But you endured that kind of hatred because somewhere, some way, in the midnight hour, you encountered a God at your kitchen table that encouraged you to stand up for justice, stand up for truth, stand up for righteousness, and lo, I will be with you. That kind of faith taught him to meet brute force with soul force, with the power of nonviolent direct action. And friends, I worry, I have to be honest with you, this King Day, I worry that we misunderstood or misunderstand Dr. King when we treat nonviolence as a form of softness, as this kind of passivity. Nonviolence is disciplined resistance. It is the moral courage we have that's formed and trained by our faith. It is soul force meeting brute force. The refusal to let hatred have the final word. And Dr. King's faith pushed him to confront the pain of this world. He only lived 39 years. By most standards, that's not a long life these days. There's no chance to grow old watching the fruit of his labor. Scripture says all these died, not having received the promise. Yet decades after his assassination, his moral clarity and moral authority speak more clearly to us today than some of the so-called leaders standing on the floor of the U.S. Congress. His words trouble our comfort. His courage questions our caution, and his insistence on justice interrupts our desire to move on too quickly. His life reminds us it's not about how long you live, but how well you live. That longevity is not the same as significance, because you cannot bury the truth. You cannot bury righteousness, because truth crushed to earth will rise again. Not about how long you live, but how well you live. And this is not simply a historical truth, but can I tell you, it's also biblical. It's also in the scriptures. I am a pastor, and so I can't leave you without giving you a little scripture. I hope that's all right this afternoon. Around 2 Kings, the 13th chapter, in the shared scriptures between Jewish and Christian traditions, we find the story of a prophet by the name of Elisha. And scripture tells us that after this prophet died, the land became vulnerable. And I believe that's a significant detail, because it doesn't say that it became vulnerable because the army fell first, or because there was some economic downturn, or because the borders were breached by some unknown force, but it says the prophet died. And when the prophet's voice fell silent, then the nation lost its moral grounding. And that suggests to me that a nation's true strength is not first measured by their military power or their economic output, but rather by its moral clarity. When prophets die, nations don't collapse overnight, but they weaken gradually. They lose their clarity about what is right and what is wrong. They lose the courage to tell the truth, especially when that truth is costly. They lose the courage to confront injustice when the prophet dies. And when that moral clarity disappears, something always rushes in to fill the void. Fear rushes in. Greed, division, violence rushes in. And we don't have to look too far to see that. We don't have to restrict our imaginations to the scriptures to see this truth. Because not too long ago, our nation marked the anniversary of January 6th. A day when the United States Capitol was overrun not by foreign enemies, but by extremists within. Lives were elevated to the level of truth. The integrity of our democracy was threatened. Political violence was justified in the name of a false righteousness. And yet, these were not invaders from outside of our borders. These were white nationalists, fascists, invaders from within, seeking to replace democratic governance with intimidation and truth with conspiracy. And you must understand, January 6th is not this isolated moment in history, but can I suggest to you that it is a symptom of a much larger sickness, because when prophetic truth is ignored, when moral voices are dismissed, and when the truth is treated as negotiable, something darker and sinister begins to organize itself. We are living in a moment where we have witnessed the largest transfer of wealth from the bottom to the top in American history. We are living in a moment where our streets have been militarized, while our schools and our hospitals and our communities are starved for resources. This is a moment where those in power are not trying to solve our problems in as much as they're trying to weaponize our divisions. We must recognize what's happening right now. They are weaponizing division, trying to convince us that we're at war with each other. Black against white, native born against immigrant, poor against poor. So that we will not recognize who's actually responsible for the conditions we are living in. Because then they can convince us that we are each other's enemies. They can convince us not to fight the systems that exploit all of us. I hope you're hearing today. That's why we are hearing this dangerous rewriting of history. This attempt to eviscerate and erase Black history in particular claims that movements for civil rights somehow victimize those who already had power. That justice was reverse discrimination. These are the words of a sitting president of the United States. That the struggle for equality harmed the very people that it sought to hold accountable. But can I tell you, these are distractions. Don't fall for the okie doke. These are designed to pull our attention away from policies that are deepening inequality in this country. Decisions that are hollowing out democracy. And we must recognize the symbol of all of this, that a president who ordered public parks to end free admission on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. That same president who destroyed the East Wing of the White House in order to glorify his own ego. We have to be clear that the streets of this country do not belong to one man. The parks of this country do not belong to one man. The White House in this country does not belong to one man, but it belongs to we the people. We as a nation have to heed this warning, because we can survive many things. We can survive political disagreement. It's okay, we can disagree. We can survive economic strain. But we cannot survive a loss of our moral vision for this world. Because when the prophets fall silent, whether it is by death or dismissal or the disregard by those in power, the people lose their bearings, their moral footing. But thanks be to God. Thanks be to God that the text does not end with the prophet's death. Because even in death, a witness still has work to do. The text tells us that there's this unexpected turn. As a man is being buried, violence interrupts the moment. Fear breaks in where grief should have been. And in that chaos, the mourners throw this dead man into the nearest grave. And it just so happens to be the grave, Brother Grundy, of the prophet Elisha. They don't offer prayers. No time to go through the funeral rituals, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Just two bodies in one grave. And the scripture says that when the man touched the bones of Elisha, he came to life. And he stood on his feet. That's all the text gives us. It doesn't dramatize the miracle, because the power is not in the spectacle there, but it's in the very presence That the bones were not magic. This is not some spooky kind of thing. I know some people say, this is why I don't go to church. This is why I don't go to synagogue. This is why y'all always talking about some spooky stuff. It is not that the bones were magic. But in those bones carried a testimony of a life committed to justice. They carried the memory of one who lived with moral clarity, who told the truth, a life of one who stood between the people and the abuse of power. Elisha's body was buried, but his witness was not dead. The prophet was gone, but the power of his faithfulness remained available in the earth realm. And when this unnamed ordinary man came into contact with the witness of Elisha, something lifeless in him stirred back to life. And that's how the biblical witness understands legacy. Legacy is not about how long you live, beloved. But legacy is what happens. That's what comes alive in others because of how you live. A faithful life leaves something behind for the next generation to work with. Not just a memory, but a moral force capable of raising what the world declared dead. And when we place the story of the prophet Elisha alongside the life of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we find new meaning in the text. Like Elisha, he lived in such a way that his witness continues to raise people long after his body was laid to rest. And when we come into contact with that witness, when we allow ourselves to live into the depth of that legacy, something in us has a chance to come alive once again. And beloved, let me just stop right here and tell you, you ought to live your life in such a way that your faith leaves a mark on this world. Whether it is Christianity, whether it is Judaism, whether it is Islam, you ought to live your life in such a way that you leave something for the next generation to work with. That your presence carries enough spirits that it stirs life in somebody else. Howard Thurman said it this way: don't ask yourself what the world needs, but ask yourself what makes you come alive and go do that. Because what the world needs are people who have come alive. The world does not need another Martin Luther King Jr. Hello, did you hang up on me? The world does not need another Howard Washington Thurman. The world does not need another Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, or Bayard Rustin. Blessed be their memory, but King is dead. Thurman is dead. Hamer, Baker, and Rustin are dead, but you are still alive. What the world needs is people willing to be stirred up by the same moral courage, so much so that they are willing to stand up. The text says that the man came to life and he stood on his feet. And we have to understand, family, that standing is not a neutral position. Taking a stand is a posture of moral responsibility. Standing means that you've returned to the work of the world. Resurrection in this story does not mean some form of escapism, but it is a type of recommitment to your assignments. The man is brought back to life not to admire the miracle, but to re-enter a world that still needs justice, that still needs truth, that still needs moral courage. And that brings us to this day. Now, Dr. King, Martin Luther King Jr. Day is not about asking what Dr. King would say if he were alive. We always have these questions. What would Dr. King be saying? What would Dr. King be doing? What would Dr. King be thinking? We quote him often enough. But the real question I want to posit this morning and this afternoon is whether we are willing to take a stand. Friends, it's time to take a stand. Whether something in us has been made alive by the clarity of his witness, the courage of his life, the moral demands of his legacy, because if contact with that witness has stirred us at all, then we have a moral obligation to take a stand. To stand for truth and for dignity and for justice. Standing is what it looks like when resurrection becomes a responsibility. And stand first is to, first of all, stand with the poor and the powerless. Dr. King's final campaign was about dignity. He died fighting for garbage workers in Memphis, Tennessee. The Poor People's Campaign was his insistence that justice is not optional and that economic exploitation is a moral issue. That a society that tolerates poverty while celebrating abundance has lost its moral grounding. Standing with the poor means insisting that dignity is not conditional. It means challenging systems that reward excess at the top while treating deprivation as inevitable at the bottom. It means recognizing that poverty is not the failure of someone's character, but it is the consequence of collective decisions. To stand is to say that those most easily ignored are in fact central to our moral life as a community. We have to take a stand for the poor. But if we're going to take a stand here, then we must also stand for peace. Peace is not silence. Peace is not avoidance. I'm not talking about a peace that asks the vulnerable to endure violence quietly. But I'm talking about a peace that's rooted in justice. Dr. King reminded us that peace is not the absence of tension, but it is the presence of justice, which means standing for peace requires more than our good intentions. It requires resisting the triplet evils of racism and militarism and capitalism. It requires rejecting anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and rejecting sexism and misogyny and homophobia and transphobia and xenophobia and any ideology that depends on the dehumanization of any human being. Peace is not passive. We are witnessing it right now in Minneapolis and across this country as people are standing in the streets saying, these streets don't belong to you, but they belong to the people. They belong to those who believe that public space should never become a theater of fear and violence. That silence in the face of injustice is not peace, but it is surrender. The best of the civil rights tradition, there are those who could have stayed home, who could have chosen safety, who could have decided that somebody else can do it. And yet they stood anyway. People like Renee Good, who paid the ultimate price for standing up. People who stand knowing the risk, knowing that history has a cruel habit of maligning the names of those who interrupt injustice instead of accommodating it. And let us be clear. We cannot comfort ourselves by feeling sorry for immigrant families as though what is happening to them could never happen to us. If the authorities can show up at an apartment building and zip-tie children, separate parents, demanding proof of belonging, if they can stop and frisk you and ask you whether or not you belong here based on what you look like, it can happen to anybody, to any one of us in this room. That's the lie of selective vulnerability. That injustice can be contained. But Dr. King taught us otherwise. He said, whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. We're all caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied together in a single garment of destiny. I cannot be what I ought to be unless you are who you ought to be. That is the moral foundation of peace. Peace requires your courage. Because peace that is absent of conflict, peace that does not confront the dangers of this world is not an authentic peace. But we practice a peace that is worth standing for. But lastly and finally, to stand is to stand for the promise. The promise that democracy belongs to all of us. The promise embedded in the simple yet demanding words, we the people. To stand for the promise is to protect the integrity of our institutions and safeguarding our democratic norms, to tell the truth even when it is uncomfortable. To insist that participation in public life be expanded and not restricted. It means understanding that democracy is not an inheritance for a selective few, but it is a trust that is to be protected and passed on from generation to generation. So we stand today. We stand honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We stand today honoring Mrs. Coretta Scott King, without whom there would be no federal holiday, honoring the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We don't do it through ceremony alone, but through people like yourselves who are willing to take a stand in the places where it costs us something, and to align our lives with justice and responsibility. The man came to life and stood on his feet. The question for us is, having been made alive by this witness, what and where are we willing to take a stand? Stand up for justice. Stand up for truth. Stand up for righteousness. And lo, the divine, the creator of the universe, God, will be with you. God bless you.
Well, I know we're not in church, but if you've ever been a part of Black church, you know we miss an opportunity, so I'm going to ask if we do it right now. Can we all look at Reverend Crawford and say, preach, preacher? Yes, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. Is it just me, or do you feel charged to keep moving forward? Charged to be ambassadors for social justice? What a powerful, powerful message from Reverend Crawford. I was struck from the opening sentence when he said, it's easier to build monuments than to truly do the work to make this world a better place. And I don't know about you, but I'm not interested in pretty pictures. I'm interested in truly doing the work. And as you leave here today, my hope and prayer is that you walk away charged and empowered. As we close the celebration with the sounds of Jocelyn and the sweet compression, let us all remember to commit to the work that we may all live, choose, and belong. Thank you, Lexington.
One, two. Should most